Greetings and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ podcast. I'm your host, Gil Maza, retired U.S. Border Patrol agent, class 313 out of San Diego sector. Today I have the extreme honor and pleasure to speak with our very own Tania Glenn, Dr. Tania Glenn. She's a licensed clinician with 32 years of experience. Tania has been deployed to Oklahoma City in 1995, in New York City in 2001, New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina in 2005, in Dallas for the aftermath of the attack on the Dallas Police Department, and even Uvalde for the school shooting in 2022. She has clients throughout Texas and Arizona police, fire, and EMS. She has helped all of our law enforcement agencies, including DHS, CBP, and especially her favorite, she says, the United States Border Patrol. She's one of a kind in her approach to law enforcement and the armed forces and first responder resiliency. With her dark sense of humor and her no-nonsense approach, she has endeared herself to all of us, from the most hardened veteran agents and officers to those who are new to our culture, and nobody knows how we tick as well as she does. She's just as good in a counseling session as she is back up in the field. I really hope you enjoy our conversation as we talk about the Border Patrol going through the time and DHS of the Biden administration and how to move forward from there. Also, don't forget to look up any of her books, including Warrior Healer, her newest one, which is available everywhere. And now, I have a conversation with our very own Tania Glenn. Well, greetings, Tania, and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be on.
Oh, I am thrilled to finally meet you face to face. We've never met in person, even though we probably trafficked in a lot of the same circles, right? Because you were involved with DHS, CBP, Border Patrol in their peer support chaplaincy program?
Yes, absolutely. For several years. One of the highlights of my career.
Yeah, and I'll say the same thing. When I at the San Diego sector in 2000, I got asked by, it was 2004. I got called into sector and I was asked about the chaplaincy program. And I knew there was one chaplain that ran around, Brian Henderson at the time, that was the chaplain for San Diego sector, but there was no chaplaincy program or chaplaincy team. He was a great guy. He did visit agents in the hospital and things like that. But it wasn't until then when they called me in and asked me to start a program, not understanding that there was already a program in Tucson, already a program in Texas. And so I kind of started from scratch. I ran into Ken Middleton. Maybe I'm sure you know Ken Middleton, right? And
yeah,
heavily
absolutely
involved. And I was in the first peer support program as well. And so I had been peer support also in the first class in San Diego. And so I was tasked with starting the San Diego sector chaplaincy team. And I grabbed 9 guys and we started the best we can. And, it's been history ever since.
Yeah. It's what an amazing program. What an honor to be involved. Love it. I just love it. Yeah.
Agreed. It was a great honor. And I'm going to talk about that. But I would like to, people can go online and I'm going in and, stalking your pages and, and your social media and things like that. And you have quite a resume, right? 32 years in, maybe more now, because I don't know how old this information is.
32.
Okay, yes. And then starting at the Oklahoma City bombing, although New York City, New Orleans, Katrina, Dallas. In fact, what kicked you off in this career was the whole Branch Davidian cult thing in Waco, right?
Absolutely. I was 3 months away from finishing my master's degree, and I knew I wanted to do trauma therapy, and I knew I wanted to do crisis intervention. And that went down. I watched it on the news. I couldn't believe it. All I wanted to do was run up to Waco and help the ATF. And I went to school the next day and I told my professors that I was going to go to places like Waco and help people like the ATF. And they told me I was crazy. So here I am, 32 years later, just as crazy as the rest of you. One of my professors actually thought that I meant that I was going to go help people like the Branch Davidians. And I was like, no, no.
That wasn't a professional opinion, was it?
It was so funny because she was shocked. She's like, oh, you want to help the ATF? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, those people are mean and they carry guns. And I'm like, right on. So here I am.
It's evident that you have the perfect temperament for law enforcement, right? Because I know that in my chaplaincy work and my peer support work, I worked with a lot of clinicians. from different places. And some of them had the temperament for law enforcement and many of them did not. And it does take a certain temperament, doesn't it, to be able to approach law enforcement for psychological services?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of a combination of an ability to roll with anything, right? Whatever is said and done, right? You just have to roll with it. Having thick skin, but also having that same big heart that law enforcement people have under that tough exterior. And I
Yeah.
think when you have thick skin but a big heart, you meet them where they are. I've noticed that in all of my workings with public safety, I think that to me, law enforcement is probably the most challenging because they're so guarded, but also just the deepest connections in terms of like my patients. I think one of my former patients who was law enforcement, she said, "You were clearly put on this earth to do this," and I have to agree. Like funny how I kind of figured out what God put me on earth to do, and it's been amazing.
Well, you're suited for it because most of all, it's you have our dark sense of humor. You have that gallows
Yeah.
humor. You probably get criticized by your peers because you speak to your clients in a way that not a lot of other clinicians can speak, and we don't use the word crazy, but for us, right, you can speak pretty much, speak your mind, say what you need to say. And I love your humor online and I love your those clips that you put on every day. In fact, I've
Thank
taken
you.
ownership. I call you my own Tania Glenn, but I think all of us that know you throughout DHS, CBP, and the Border Patrol think that you belong to us, right? Because you do take care of us. You have done so much for so many people. And once I announced that when I started sharing those things, I started getting messages going, "Oh, do you know Tanya? Oh, I did this," and over and over and over again, guys and gals out there in the patrol. Throughout the Border Patrol that said, how much they love and appreciate you because you just have this down to earth, honest, right? If I go to a regular psychologist, which I have in the past used services like that, I immediately get turned off with the little gentle touchy feely thing. I can't. That's not for me, and it's not for many of us.
Yeah.
You don't. That's not your
Yeah.
approach, is it?
Not at all. Not at all. I was joking. One of my former patients, police officer, you could tell he was really anxious. It was his first appointment. He's in the waiting room, and I went to get him, and I was walking to my office. He was walking behind me, and he goes he goes to my back. He goes, "Just so you know, this is bullshit." And I said, "Just so you know, you're in charge." And he's like, "Oh." And he's like, I'm like, "You're in the driver's seat. I'm just along for your bumpy ride." And he's like, "Okay." And it's like, as soon as he said that, and I came back with what I said, it was like instant rapport. Like
Yes.
you just have to know how to meet people where they are. And to me, that's like the best thing I've done in this is just learning and understanding and leaning into the culture. I think part of it's not just my personality; it's all the ride-alongs I've done, all the
Yeah.
flying with AMO. I went through a police academy for 6.5 months, cut off all my hair, got the snot beat out of me.
Really?
I feel like I've just ingrained myself. Yeah, yeah, and I
Wow.
love it. Hmm.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all, right? Because that soft approach doesn't work a lot for us. I know that I remember one time a clinician in particular came in to teach a class, and she walks in and she's talking to us, and of course, we're disrespecting, we're talking to each other, we're not paying attention, and she literally dressed us down the next few minutes. She goes, "Either pay attention because you're here to learn something, or get the hell out," and she didn't say get the hell out, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
She said get the F out. And man, everybody was in love with her after that. Everybody just sat there like this, yeah. Because but she laid down the law and we were good to go, right? And she knew what to say to us, because if she had kept going or kind of asked politely or asked nicely, he wouldn't have gotten a response. And I know that's your approach too. You're direct, you're you're on point, and you don't pull your punches. And a lot of us, that's what we need to hear, that strong talk. Now, tell us a little bit about, like I said, people can go throughout your history, but I'd like to hear your involvement throughout DHS, CBP, and Border Patrol, and how you got started there and what's been your experience.
Yeah, so it actually started in 2000, before DHS and CBP, the pre 9/11. I spoke at the association. It was it was an air medical association for law enforcement agencies, and it was Airborne Law Enforcement, so ALEA, Airborne Law Enforcement Association. And I did my class. It was the first time I was there, and everybody kind of came up afterwards and thanked me, and they left. And there was this row of blue flight suits in the back, and it was customs, and they were all customs pilots. And they just had this like stunned look on their face. And they're like, we need to talk to you. And 2.5 hours later, we were done talking, and they were walking me through the crashes and all the things that they had been through. So I started sort of contracting with Legacy U.S. Customs, Air and Marine Interdiction. Back then, they were called Air and Marine Interdiction. And then 9/11 happened, and then I was kind of rolled into. I saw the agency kind of AMO flip between ICE and CBP and back and forth and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Went to Katrina with them. In Katrina, I noticed that the pilots were so stressed because there was so much like upheaval, like where they were going to land in terms of ICE, CBP, or not have a job at all. And they were so stressed and so worried that they weren't even like really focused on Katrina stuff. And so at the time I talked to the director. I was like, hey, this agency needs a home, because I feel like in terms of aviation, they're in that chain of events that leads to a crash. And so he's like, can you put that in a memo? Because we really need a home. So I did. And I was called to DC by the powers that be above the director. I was called an alarmist. My contract was canceled, and I was sent home.
Oh
And
my
then the
God.
next year, AMO had 3 crashes. I know. So the next year, the AMO had 3 crashes, so they brought me back. I always joke it's like an abusive relationship.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And
Oh
I'll always
yes.
come back, right? And so then I continued on, yeah, yeah. So I continued on with AMO. It's typical, like CBP, right?
Yes.
And then, yeah, one day I was training the AMO cert and had a brand new pilot out of San Diego, Chad Hessenflow, and he had been Border Patrol. He was
I worked with them. I
4
worked with
star
them in
class
El
one.
Cajon, back in El Cajon. Yes.
Yep, yeah. So Chad reaches out to Scotty Bryant, and he's like, "Hey, you need to meet this person and see this stuff." So Scotty Bryant, the first Border Patrol agent I ever met, reaches out as the 4 star commander at the time, and he sends me an email, and he's like, "Hey, if you're ever in El Paso, we'd like to meet you." And I said, "Hey, how about these dates in 2 weeks?" And he's like, "Great." And so I flew out there, and that what they realized is that he thought I was going to El Paso for something else, and I was just going to sleep. No, I made a trip, and I sat down with SOG Command, and I did a little presentation, and they're like, "Well, let's stick her in front of our agents and see how this goes." So they invited me back to El Paso, put me in front of a bunch of board tackers, and they stood back and watched it happen. And I love educating. And I make all of my education like about the science of stress, the brain, the body, fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, all the things that happen. We don't talk
Yeah.
about feelings. We talk about all like, survival and kicking butt, but the impact on your mental health. We talk about solutions and prevention of PTSD and mitigation and all the things they need to hear, right?
Yes.
And afterwards, a bunch of board tackers lined up to talk to me. And they're like, wow. So then they put me on a contract, and I did kind of a sector tour. I went from west to east, and I hit all of the sectors for Borstar Bortac in about a year.
In Texas, or
And
like all across the
when I was
country?
in all across, started
Okay. Okay.
in, they sent me to San Diego first,
Okay.
right? Then they sent me to Yuma in August. So they kind
That
of
must have
warmed
been a
me up with
test.
San Diego, and they're like, all right, now that you're hooked, we'll send you to Yuma in August.
Yeah, that was a
so
test.
so yeah. And then I got to Tucson, and I was supposed to go to Tucson twice, and it was just a couple of years after Brian Terry. And like I walked in, and like the pain was palpable. Like there was so much trauma and there was so much pain that they ended up sending me to Tucson for five trips to do training and trauma treatment.
Okay.
And it was during my time in Tucson that I met my first peer support person. And he started talking to me about Border Patrol peer support. And he said, come to one of our classes. I'm like, invite me. So I did the 2 week class. loved it. And I was just hooked. I was so hooked at that point. And then I went on to teach peer support for many years. And so it's been this
That
incredible
had to be
journey.
Jimmy Stout.
No, it was Simon.
Oh, okay. In Tucson?
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised.
It was,
I'm surprised because okay, well,
yeah.
Jimmy was part of more of the chaplaincy program. Now that I think about it, so
Yeah. 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 So yeah, we've actually met at a Diamond Shamrock. I was riding out with a Boar Star member, and we were at the Diamond Shamrock, and here come these other agents, and they're
yeah,
kind of like sniffing me out like they do, you know.
yeah.
and he's like, well, I'm peer support. And I was like, oh my gosh, tell me about your peer support program. And he's like, well, you should come to our training. And so I did. It was amazing. I loved it. I loved it. By the way, on that ride along with the Boar Star agent,
Yeah.
one of my favorite Border Patrol stories. So they're tracking a group, and we're like heading out there. And he's like, okay, so when we get there, I'm just going to jump out and start running. And I was putting my hair up in a ponytail.
Getting ready.
And I was like, I'm a runner, so I'm going to be right behind you. And he's like, okay. So we take off running, and I have like a short sleeve polo on, and we end up, we don't catch the group, we catch the dope, right? We get the dope. I can't stand that we didn't catch the group because I'm too typing. But
Yes.
we're standing there, and I look down at my arms, and we had run through like all that underbrush in Tucson.
Yeah.
And I have like just all the prickly like points and blood running down my arms. I was
Yes.
like, hey, and I was like, hey, I just figured out why you guys wear long sleeves. And they're like, ah, crap. And one of them goes, we've had the doctor for 15 minutes and she's already bleeding. We're so in trouble.
Yeah. That's pretty typical. Yes.
Yeah.
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 So you definitely earned your stripes that day.
Yeah. I just love it. I love it. I emailed Scotty Bryant that night. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I bleed green. And he's like, I knew it. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So like we of course you and I both understand and kind of like the dynamic with law enforcement, right? But real quickly, what is the difference between, say, psychological services for the regular person as opposed to psychological services that apply to a law enforcement first responder?
The biggest thing I would say in terms of comparing like first responders to civilians, normal people,
yes,
is that so my analogy is this: if you have that hard landing, right, on the runway, and the overhead bins fly open and the baggage flies out. Most civilians, when they go to therapy, they want the therapist who's going to unzip the bag, go through all the dirty laundry, unfold it, repack it, put it back in the overhead bin and shut it. Public safety people need the bag back in the bin, slam shut, because you're on the line tomorrow. So a lot of times it is like laser focused on managing whatever awful thing has happened and getting people to bounce back, because they have to go to work and they have to provide for their families, and we don't want to threaten their careers. So we get the bag in the bin and shut it real fast. If they want to come back and unfold and go through all the dirty laundry, they can. Most people on the line don't have the time or the resources to do that, or even the desire, right?
Yes.
And so
yes.
it is a very, very laser focused stabilization, mitigation, get them back on the line. And then, if they want to come in and do some other stuff, absolutely. But that's the difference, is that you can't spend 4 sessions talking about someone's social history when they have just been involved in a shooting and they need to be back at work next week, right? You just can't. And so most therapists are like, well, we'll do your intake and then I'll see you next week and we'll start talking about your childhood. And people are like, I have, I just witnessed this helicopter crash. Like, I need to get back to work. Right. So that's the biggest difference, is you have to understand that people's livelihood and their ability to feed their families is very much on the line every time they come in for help.
Yeah, and that seems to be across the board, the sense that, and we see it in the movies, and I think people just kind of just go past it because they wonder why, is that you could see there's a soldier there that's literally decimated, and all he wants to do is get back to his unit.
Right,
just
right.
Stitch me up, give me a shot, whatever it takes, just get me back. And now extend that to across the board to law enforcement and to to first responders. It's like Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here with you and discuss my life and my childhood because I do have to get back to work tomorrow because I
Right.
am a border patrol agent. I am a law enforcement officer. I am a medic. I got to get back to work. And yeah,
Right.
it's about supporting. It's about, getting the paycheck and things like that. But mainly it's like that drive to just get back on the line and get back into
Right.
the fight.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Dogs got to hunt. Right. So yeah. So it's about restoring that as quickly as possible so that we can get people back to, and being at muster that next day, that's your comfort zone, right? That's your place. That's your people, your camaraderie, your
That's
work
another thing.
family, right? And that's what do human beings need to do is after a crisis or trauma, we want them to return to their baseline level of functioning as quickly as possible. And so for any PA, that's at that muster, right? At 6 a.m. or
Absolutely.
whatever
Yes.
time, right?
Yes.
That's
It
it.
should be family. It should be those things. That should be your baseline, but it's not. It's getting back to that next muster, getting in that ride and getting out into that, to your AOR, your area of operations of work and getting back to work is like the somehow the driving force that's ingrained in us.
Right. Right.
Not family
Absolutely.
first, even though, and again, we'll say, right, we're doing this for our family. We're doing this to support and take care of our family. And that is true 100%. But it's like, get me back on the line as quickly as
Absolutely.
possible.
Absolutely.
Now, are you still involved right now actively in providing services for DHS, CBP, or Border Patrol?
So I have a contract with Air Marine Operations.
Okay.
So yeah, so heavily involved with them. I will say though, when bad things happen, there's a little crossover. I mean, obviously you could have AMO and BP on the same event, and so when I go, I help as many people as I can.
I
So
know you do.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's your reputation. That's your reputation. Because even though you might not be officially there for the Border Patrol or anything else, but I know that they hold that special place, right? Everybody is special, right? Everybody's everybody, but Border Patrol, right? I know that they have a special place in your heart. So let's talk a little bit because here's where I'm gonna, take advantage of some, free therapy here. I retired in March of 2021. And that is the January 2021 when the Biden administration took office. Okay. And I'm not here to get political, just so everybody knows we're not going to talk about all the background stuff, but I do want to talk in general terms that I will describe it and I'll let you describe, how you saw the last 4 years. But was to me the greatest and deadliest taxpayer funded illegal alien smuggling event, invasion event, and border security breach in the history of our country. Here's where we saw the most entries, the most apprehensions, the most releases into the country, the most fentanyls come in, human trafficking tripled, quadrupled, child trafficking, all these things, all in these 4 years surpassed anything we've seen in the history of our country. And that's measurable simply by going to ICE, DHS, or CBP websites and just looking at the numbers. Okay, putting that aside for a moment, that's my characterization of the last 4 years. And never mind, we're not going to talk about, how it's affected every level of society, all the border cities and towns, and how every city has become a border state, how the cartels have taken massive footholds with all these gangs in all the cities. Okay, putting that aside, what happened to our agents in those 4 years? Now, I retired. And as far as I was concerned, I was going to just sell some old patrol fun stuff, talk about history, promote our history, our heritage, our legacy with a few shenanigans along the way. But all of a sudden, Tanya, I find myself neck deep in intel coming in from the field. Gil, we just shut down San Diego sector or the Del Rio sector, El Paso. I said, what do you mean you shut down the sector? Yeah, everybody's processing. Nobody's in the field. No, that's not possible. Yeah, it's happening. And of course, we know that all those things happen. The psychological and emotional effect, the phone calls, I almost got a divorce. My wife said, you retired from the patrol, but you are working 24 hours a day, getting phone calls at all hours of the night. I can't handle this. I can't take this. We're releasing these people. We're releasing, criminals. We're releasing all these things. And we're not allowed to do our job. And little by little, the focus of the job became, catch and release, catch and remove, and everything that happened. And now the agents are watching as these criminal alien savages that were released into the country are killing Americans, and the impact that it had. Deserted, abandoned, helpless, frustrated.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. I can't think. Highest rate of suicides, in the history of the patrol. I'm not going to say, I will not sit here and say scientifically that it was the Biden administration or that administration that caused it, but it didn't help during that time, right?
Right.
So I know this question is going on way long, but I'm just, giving you, okay, this is the way I saw it. And even as a bystander outside of the patrol, not even involved in the field, you can talk to my wife about the emotional, mental, psychological stress that I think was worse. I think I'd rather be in the field in the middle of the night chasing unknown people with machine guns and drugs than the anguish I went through some of these days throughout the last 4 years. Yeah. So I forgot what the question was. That's how I thought the last 4 years. What about you?
Yeah, I think that heartbreaking, right? All of this heartbreaking. I think that when you recruit agents to do a job and then you train them to do that job, right? And Border Patrol to me is in terms of law enforcement, and I hear this from other federal law enforcement agents, that Border Patrol is the hardest job. It's the most rugged, it's the most wear and tear, it's the most dangerous because you're often alone in your AOR and you encounter groups of, as many as however many people coming, right?
Up to 100.
So Border Patrol especially the patrol has been historically very rugged, very independent, doing very dangerous work. And when you recruit agents to do this job and then you train them to do this job, and then you suddenly change that job, and it is counter everything that's intuitive inside of you that you're trained to do, that you're desiring to do, what happens is a sense of helplessness. And I will tell you, in trauma treatment, helplessness is the number one emotion that gets processed when we do the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR treatment.
Yeah.
And helplessness is very bad for the psyche of first responders and especially law enforcement, because you're trained to always be in control, maintain control, take control.
Yeah.
So
there's the last thing we do.
Absolutely.
We don't helplessness.
Absolutely. You will fight to the death before you experience helplessness, right? And then the other thing is just the moral injury of what has happened to Americans for people who've been released, right? And I've seen some of the videos of PAs distraught because they processed somebody that killed an American. Like, the moral injury is when we as human beings, we perceive some sort of moral transgression, like we didn't do our job, we didn't do it well enough, we didn't do it right, we are to blame for something bad happening. The concept was born out of combat, but it very much applies to public safety. And so now, with all of that, right, now, and so you know how I am, and my thought is now the healing begins. We go back to work, we allow people to do their jobs, we heal the pain, we heal the trauma, we address the moral injury, we restore resilience. To me, it's like, despite everything that happened, let's go. It's go time. Let's get people well again. Let's get the psyche intact again. That's been my sort of focus, as things have changed.
Right. Now, see, in these last 4 years, right, with all that's going on, so you have an entire agency, and not just Border Patrol. I heard from the Blue, right, CBPOs and all those, and a lot of those guys committed suicide and gals committed suicide as well. And the overtime and the stress and everything else, the processing and releasing of these criminals. So I heard they're just as emotionally stressed and burdened by this whole thing. But at the same time, right, you see that throughout DHS and CBP that they are trying to establish some type of resiliency program, some type of resiliency, try to provide to the agents a little something. And my take was, when you see someone drowning, first thing to do is get him out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How do you offer help to someone that's underwater? Mm-hmm. And so, Speak a little bit to that. Like, how would that work in that situation when these guys, you're not going to change what's happening around them. You're not going to change the reality of the releases and everything else and the moral injury and the helplessness to do all these things. You're not going to change that at all. That's not going to change at all. How do you still try to apply resiliency help in that situation in the last 4 years?
And that's an individual question and answer for each Border Patrol agent and their family, right? So some have relied on their faith. Some have just like mentally just like numbed out and hunkered down until this administration was no longer there. However people have gotten through it. I know that, there's a couple events I was on, just kind of having dinner with some Border Patrol agents and AMO folks. It was just like, I do it for the brother and sister to my left and my right. And that's why I'm here every day, is because I will be here for them until something changes, right? And so whatever it is that captures you to hang on, like whatever that foothold is, each person has to find that, right? And I think that by throwing all the resilience stuff out there, you hope that something speaks to someone. I know the thing I like about CBP and resilience is they try every avenue of, like, if they'll talk about like deep breathing and yoga, and to one PA that's like, oh, that's pretty cool. To another, they're like, whatever. But that to another PA, it's like going to the range and shooting a bunch is their sort of their wellness. Yes. Whatever it is, I do like the fact that CBP, the attempt for resilience and wellness tries to speak on so many different sort of mediums and levels, and so at some point it's going to speak to somebody, right? And so, but really, truly, the last 4 years to me, it's boiled down to each individual, like making the decision,
kind of hunkering down and making up, figuring out their way of coping with it until they can get through it, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So the thing about too is that and again, I have been peer support. I have been a chaplain for all those years that I was in the patrol, and I saw, of course, some people are happy to see you, happy to work, and happy that you showed up and everything, and then other people just criticize, right? And they complain, or they don't trust the system. And there was a lot of that going on in the behind the scenes that I was getting, is that at this time, Alejandro Mayorkas and the upper brass management of DHS, whatever, and even throughout a lot of the sectors, that agents were getting investigated, like literally, like every social media post, every like. I offer, one time I said, for every one of you guys that's being investigated for posting on my pages, Old Patrol HQ. In fact, for a while, we couldn't have this conversation, right? For a little while, you and I, because of everything that was going on, the stigma behind it. They were being disciplined. OPR investigations, discipline. And I said, if you can show me where Old Patrol is involved there because of what you posted. And I had to shut it off at 68 coins in just the first week. Because I said, I'll give you a coin for, kind of just trying to improve morale. But I would have given out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of coins if I had kept going, because they were being literally, their social media monitored 24 hours a day. They couldn't share any information. Now, of course, there's OPSEC, right? You don't want to share, information that is dangerous or might get one of us hurt or killed. But on the other hand, just a simple like or a simple comment, like this is hell, whatever. Any offhanded comment would get them in trouble. So without getting into the whole thing of the effectiveness of peer support and chaplaincy and everything else, because I've seen the beauty of it and I've seen the ugly of it. I'm sure you have too. It got to a point where a lot of the people I was talking to, I said, you know what? Get your help wherever you can get it. If you got to go outside agency, if you got to go to your own personal medical, if you got to pay out of pocket, but you need help. If you don't trust the system, if you don't trust, that you're not going to get, and that's the biggest fear, right? We go to a psychologist, you get rubber gunned, and the problem is the moment anybody goes on admin leave in the patrol, everybody knows.
Everybody knows, right?
So you can try, as much as confidentiality has always also been a big problem throughout CBP and DHS, especially when it comes to the policies of peer support and chaplaincy. So all those struggles throughout all those 4 years, Is the peer support chaplaincy programs throughout DHS, CBP, and Border Patrol, in your opinion, still effective in-house?
Yeah, I do
Or
think, yeah, I think
or is
that,
the alternative offer something that they can walk out the door, they can walk outside DHS, CBP to reach out and perhaps feel more confident and safe that it's not going to spread or anybody's going to know? Thoughts about
yeah,
that?
yeah, I think it's both. I think that, there's no like one size fits all, of course, for anything. I think that within, I want to believe that between chaplaincy and peer support, there's a lot of good things happening. Because I talk to a lot of the peer support people,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of really good things happening.
Yes.
But I also think that having the ability to access outside services too. Some people will only talk to peer support and will never talk to someone like me. Some people will never talk to peer support, but they'll talk to, maybe peer support with a marshal service
Yeah.
outside, or they'll talk to someone like me. And so I think that the more you can offer options, then people can decide what's best for them. And I think that there is a strong with Ken Middleton developed such a strong program, and I feel like while it's been challenged and it's been stressed the past several years, I do think that there is a very important place for peer support and the chaplaincy within CBP DHS. And so I would, I just know that there are people who feel like that is really truly who they want to talk to because you understand that kind of stuff. So I think what you do is you offer as much as you can, and people can pick and choose.
Yeah, well, I'll say that in my experience, nobody, and you might know better. I don't know. If you do, don't tell me. Nobody outside the Border Patrol does a better job at taking care of our line of duty deaths, of our line of duty families, right? Police Week's a fine example of that. We have, all hands on deck, peer support chaplain, the honor guard. And I remember I got to do it for 7 years. I got to be the incident commander for it 2 years in a row. And my best part was being at that airport and not only taking care of Border Patrol families that came in of our line of duty border deaths, but handling everybody else that didn't have anybody to meet them, to greet
Yeah,
them. Sheriffs, PDs across the country, FBI, it didn't matter, whatever law enforcement agency. If we found out that that family didn't have somebody waiting for them at that gate, we went to that gate. And
yeah,
one of my, it's poignant because it was such a powerful spiritual experience, but you are experiencing it for the wrong reasons. But I got to board a plane and make the announcement on there that we were there to pick up anybody, the law enforcement families that are here. They got to come off the plane first and meet honor guard, and then we carried their bags to wherever they were going and delivered them to their cars, to their families, to their vans.
yeah,
Nothing like it. But I believe with all my heart that there's nobody out there that does that better than the Border Patrol. The only part
absolutely.
that I think that I would be cautious about is I think that a lot of times we get the feeling that as peer support and even as chaplains, we're counselors,
Mhm.
and we might even have trained counselors out there, guys that and gals that are doing this job that are trained counselors. But I think there's a place for that. That has to be separate,
Mhm.
right? I believe that my job as a chaplain was to go out, meet up with one of my peers as a peer, right? I went through the academy. I went through, my 10 month, my test, everything else to get to that job. And I'm working the field and I'm in uniform and we can talk about this. But there comes a point where, I have to decide as a chaplain, this is above my pay grade.
Yep. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And
Oh,
we have
absolutely.
to be able to be willing to give up and refer someone. And sometimes, we latch on, we latch in. I made sure I made no personal friends when it came to that. I did end up making a couple of friends of my line of duty desk that we still communicate and everything, but I did not want to become
Right.
their go-to for
Right.
their healing and grieving process.
Right, absolutely. I think that's an important part of the training is that you understand kind of what your limitations are. And I think that when people in chaplaincy and peer support are well trained, they know the limits and they're not afraid to understand those limits and not get sucked into just trying to figure out like how to change the person or help this person. I've noticed that when team members get overwhelmed and they're way beyond their capacity, and I'm like, hey, let's pass them off to me or to a team member or to another clinician, right? There's almost like a sense of incredible relief because they're like, okay, oh, so I don't have to engage anymore, because then they start to realize, oh, like they got so sucked into it, right? So it's good. It's a good like tag team kind of a thing to have good clinicians who can pick up where maybe that's going on and offer, the way the path ahead that really gives that peer support and chaplain a lot of relief. So it's good.
Yeah. So it's been a messy 4 years. That there's no bones about that, right? Who knows what would have happened if this administration continued? We somehow managed to get, this new administration in, and I'm using general terms because I pretty much know what you think about all that, but that's not what the purpose of this is. But we have been now granted a reprieve from this nightmarish influx, right, of just releasing people willy-nilly, releasing people. So all that's starting to get buttoned down. And now all these agents that have survived these last 4 years, the emotional, mental anguish, the spiritual, psychological anguish of this whole thing in front of them. Not to mention, Tania, 4 years of trainees that saw nothing but processing and now have to walk into the field and experience for the first time a belligerent suspect. Someone violent. I remember the first time that I was wearing my uniform, my badge, and my gun, and someone didn't do what I said. I was shocked. I was like, I got a badge, I got a gun. Why aren't you doing what I tell you, right? And it was such a shock to the system that people don't just obey.
Right.
How do you think? They? We move forward now with that dynamic, and now an environment that is enforcement. That, like you talked about, in our DNA, we were created for 100 years. We were created for one thing only: enforcement. Right? Get the job done. Go out and get the bad guy. Go out and stop that dope. Go out and secure that border. And now we are 4 years of just asylum, and now this. How do we transition?
I think for the people who were PAs before, it's going to be that muscle memory. They're going to go back. It's going to be an easy. They're just going to go. It's inside of them. It's ingrained. It's their instincts. It's their training. It's their desire, right? But I think that where the bridge will have to happen, where this gap has to be bridged, is for the people who come out of the academy in the last 4 years. They don't know Mean Green. They don't know what it's like to do this. They've only known this. So there is going to be a very, very big learning curve. And I think that the Border Patrol agents that were in existence before everything changed in the last 4 years, I think that they're going to have to do a lot of due diligence to train these new ones. Like, hey, this is actually how we do it. Like, this is what we do. And it's going to be, and it's kind of hard to remember that this person is kind of like, now they're kind of like a baby PA, even though they may have been out of the academy for 3-4 years.
Yes.
They're a baby PA. This is all new. So that is going to have to be the biggest thing that the more senior agents are going to have to remember, is that you're going to have to retrain these folks. You're going to have to bring them into the way we do things, the operation and the tempo and everything.
So are you saying that we're going to have to bring back that journeyman Border Patrol agent position again to the, did anybody hear that? I hope everybody heard that. Yeah.
Say that, but okay.
That was the bread and butter back in the day, right? Because you had journeyman agents that took on these youngsters, regardless of where they came from. And yes, I think you have a point there that we do still have a lot of legacy old patrol out there minded individuals that want to still cut sign, are better at sniffing dope in the highway than dogs are. Still have that mentality, and a lot of youngsters, and we don't give them a lot of credit, because even up until these last 4 years, the guys that have been in 5-6 years and things like that are legendary sign cutters. Still, we still got those guys. We still got those legendary highway dogs, chasing traffic and dope. And so looks like we're going to have to depend on those guys to bring up these other ones that have come up in the last 4 years and get back to the basics,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Cutting the
absolutely.
sign, chasing traffic, working the field, knowing the signs, knowing your landmarks, all those kind of things that basically is our history and legacy.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it can be done. I think it's gonna for a lot of border patrol agents, they're gonna feel really empowered by training the new ones and mentoring them. I think that one of the best things we can do as human beings is to mentor and help others, right? And to be someone that can be a go-to for all the questions and all the
Yeah.
concerns. And I feel like a lot of border patrol agents fill that role very well. They take that on, as their responsibility to mentor the young ones. And so
Yeah.
here we go. It's the tricky part's going to be realizing that maybe this person has been out for 3.5 years and they're just as sort of green to the process as the one who got out 6 months ago, right?
A
So
little bit
it's
out of
going to be,
practice.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I want to remind all the agents that are out there now that are in that position that have had that old patrol experience that understand all that. Hey, bro, there's some glory in that, right? Come out of retire a legend, right?
hmm
Let the youngsters say that you came in and you mentored them and trained them and led them, and we can make the border patrol great again, right?
Right, right,
So,
exactly.
yeah, oh, and this has been such a great conversation with you, and it's been healing for me as well in the sense that that I also had to kind of buckle down and say, okay, I gotta give my wife her consideration, and no, this has got to end at some point in the day. This has got to stop, and I gotta take care of my wife and my life and my family. Exercise and diet and exercise has been my go-to, has been my saving grace, my faith, right, and my in church, my service in church. All those things have been my saving grace. And again, I'm not in the field. I'm just, I've just been this loudmouth, pundit, just sharing information from the field. Most of the time I get it right. Sometimes I get it wrong, but I felt an obligation to my fellow agents to share that information so that we can keep this in the forefront of America so that maybe something would change. And I think that through social media, not legacy media,
Mhm.
this is why this president got elected. Right? It
Right.
wasn't because of the legacy media. It was because of all the social media and a bunch of jackasses like us screaming at the top of our lungs the entire time. This is a nightmare. This is a mess. This is a mess. Trying to, my wife has complained, not complained in a bad way, but it's like you're in this business to make money. Yet you're giving away 2/3 of our merchandise to people for what? Well, for morale, right? If somebody sends me information, somebody sent this, I just do my best doing my little part. I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of us out there probably, working hard doing the same thing.
Right.
Now, with all that said, and we'll button down a little bit here, and I want to get to talking about your book, Warrior Healer, which I bought right here. Look at that. Yeah.
So sweet.
But I'm very disappointed because nope, nothing. No. Oh, but anyway. No, I want to encourage everybody to get that book, but what does the future of peer support chaplaincy, and I'm talking about, most agencies don't have in-house guys. They're not fellow agents. They're not fellow officers. They're chaplains and clergy and people from the outside that come in to do these services. What's the future for a program with the model that it's a fellow agent that's going to be responding to your initial situation first?
Yeah, I think, obviously there are a lot of agencies who do that because they want their own in-house. And the key is you train them well, right? You arm them with all the good knowledge and skills that they need to have to do that. And boy, you really, really button down on that confidentiality and make sure
Oh
that
God,
it's airtight, right?
that
Because
has been a
when
big
that's
problem
destroyed,
for us.
right, right. And I do think that with enforcement being the focus again, and of course that increasing danger. I do think that peer support and chaplains can really kind of really focus on really bolstering their training and doing this job very well. And then each border patrol agent has to take responsibility for their own resilience, right? Just kind of like you did in your retirement with diet and exercise. I always say that the foundations of resilience for everybody individually are hydration, nutrition, rest, and exercise. and then your life outside the job, your family, your faith, your friends, and your hobbies. And that's everybody's individual responsibility, to accept the help when it's available and you need it, and then to be good help and to serve like with a servant's heart, and to preserve the dignity of everybody that you work with. I think when we put all that together, then we have a strong agency, and it can be done.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a loaded question. Okay. And this has been a question that I saw us struggle with the entire time I was peer support and chaplaincy. How much level of confidentiality does a program, and let's just talk in general, in this situation where you're a fellow agent, how much confidentiality is necessary? Now, when the chaplain, just as an example, when the chaplaincy first started, they wanted a clergy penitent privilege.
Yeah.
Right? 100% across the board, no matter what is said in that moment as a chaplain, that was kept in confidence. The patrol, the DHS, CBP at the time, and Border Patrol said, no. If you hear that a crime is being committed or a policy is being broken, you got to report that, right? So, you have enough confidentiality that you can speak to somebody, assess their situation, send them to go get help. And unfortunately, the process is skewed because somehow, some way in that process, everybody ends up finding out, at least that you're not right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The rubber gun squad, the admin, whatever it is, somehow it gets out somehow, some way. Right. So how much confidentiality at minimum do you think we need in an agency like DHS, CBP, Border Patrol to be able to function at maximum capacity?
So when I taught peer support, it was, Ken Middleton's model. The limitations were like if you threaten to harm yourself or somebody else, right? Child and elder abuse, right?
Yeah.
And then felonies that would get you terminated. So if you were pushing fentanyl across the border, or you were, being bribed, or you were trafficking humans, that has to be reported, but not policy violations. Policy violations were not that we didn't have to go outside of the confidentiality. So it was just felonies, right? So to me, it's like, threatening to harm people, yourself or others, child and elder abuse, and then felonious activities that would get you terminated from the patrol, right? But that when I taught, those were the three limits of confidentiality, and that's how I run all my peer support programs and all my agencies across the country. Is those are the three limitations, right? And as therapists, we have threat to harm self and others and child and elder abuse, that we don't have the felony one. But I think that if we can get to that, then we have a solid program.
Yeah, because I will say that and I know this from experience and from plenty of trainings and even academies that I've attended, that policy violations are not off the table when it comes to confidentiality in the patrol.
Yeah,
siphoning, like stealing gas, or claiming extra hours, or all the kind of stuff, or different things like that can be done. That are policy violations of the Border Patrol manual. Those are reportable. So I was just.
Yeah, I think if we can get back to the way it was, then we have a much more solid program.
Yeah, well, I said, I know that right now there are tons of guys and gals out there working as chaplains, as peer supporters throughout the country that have done a world of good. And I worked with them a lot during my time in. But I think that moving forward, like you said, I think that even now that morale is pumping up, the enforcement's ramping up, we're getting out back into the field, we're starting to feel who we were, getting back to who we were back in the day, and all the things that you said about journeymen. Basically, they may not be titled journeymen, but they are journeymen, right?
Yeah.
They are the go-to guy, because they know the field, they know sign cut, they know tracking, they know how to handle suspects, they know belligerent suspects, things that maybe a lot of these guys now in the last 4 years have not been able to do. But we do have to each take responsibility for our own resilience.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yep. We have in our waiting room, we have gun locks that we made for, it was during September 2 years ago. So it was Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And we made these locks, and on one side of the lock, it has our company logo, and on the other side it says, "You are valued, you are loved." And we leave them in our waiting room, and just we have a little sign that says, "If you need a lock, take as many as you need." And to date, we've passed out 250 locks. And every time I see that we need to replenish the locks out there, like it's like my heart skips a beat, because I know whether people take them as a souvenir or they take them because they need them. Like, to me, it's like this is all about the messaging that you are valued, you are loved, that you take responsibility for your resilience, you ask for help when you need it. I do think that, a lot of CBP could really learn from, like, the former Dallas police chief.
Yeah.
An amazing human being. When he came on board for Dallas PD, and he set the tone. He's like, if you need help, you come forth. We get you help, and you go back to work. And in his tenure, it was like, I think 7 or 8 officers went through, like, treatment, went back to the line, no punishment. And you know what they did? They told a lot of Dallas police officers, hey, if you're struggling, like, they have your back. If we can create that environment, then we have a massively resilient workforce. We have to kind of turn the tide of everything that's been going on, and not just approach it as, oh, just another CBP suicide. To me, it's like, no, it's not just another CBP. That's somebody's mother, father, husband,
Yes.
wife. That person is loved. And so it's not just another suicide. We got to hit it. Like, we got to hit it. We got to go for it.
Absolutely, Tanya. And the thing about it is that this job from the beginning, you're right, from the get-go, has been a thankless job for the most part. Most of us don't do it because we want the public to thank us or anybody to thank us or anything like that. But it's been worse, and throughout, even throughout my career, there's been times when politically my presence has been, spit on and vilified or whatever, and other times I'm lauded as a hero. But the last 4 years, these agents have been accused, have been vilified, have been slandered, have been run through the mill, have been told, and many times even by me looking at some of the things that are going out there. I think most agents understand I'm not attacking them. I'm attacking the structure, the management, or the situation. But still, they can't help feel like, man, we know we're the villains in this story. But I think, like what you said, between us, strapping us up strapping up and looking toward our fellow individuals, our fellow agents, and then taking that extra step to say, you know what, now we're gonna pick up our rides, go back out into the field, and start, working this traffic. Let's go out there and get to know the area. Let's get to know our sensors. Let's get to know our landmarks. That's gonna really bring back that mean green camaraderie. Because
Right.
one of the biggest complaints I get in the last 4 years is that that united mean green family, while some cliques still exist, still are very tight, most of the last 4 years and the new agents and things like that still feel outside that loop, outside that family.
Right.
Because if
Right.
you didn't have it coming in these last 4 years, there really wasn't a huge effort to make it, to
Right.
incorporate it, because it was every man for himself. It was
Mhm.
everybody trying to survive another day of processing, of releasing, of everything that was going on. And now it seems we can kind of catch our breath,
Mhm. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
we're at a point where we're like, okay, it's too quiet, now what? Let's get back
Yeah.
to work.
Let's get
Right.
back to work. Right. Yeah. And let's bring the young ones in. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk to me about Warrior Healer, because
So, Warrior
I heard
Healer.
that's also your nickname.
So Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, who wrote On Killing and On
Yeah,
Combat, he nicknamed
yeah.
me that many years ago. Yeah. And that's my 10th book. For my 10th book, I picked the most sort of difficult patients that I have worked with through my career. I think the ones that just kind of touched me the most. And they submitted their story, and boy, did they bring it. They did not hold back.
I
And
know.
then I
Yeah.
talked about what it was like being their therapist, and so it's been a huge blessing. We turned it into a documentary called Warriors and Healers. It's on YouTube,
Okay.
and yeah, it was just for my 10th book. I wanted to be really personal and just very demonstrative of just the work that I do. So it was super fun to write it.
Well,
So
I don't think I did not realize until I was researching how much work you have put together, all the books you put together, the documentaries, and and not to mention interviews, and I'm sure the man hours that you have had in trying to take care of our law enforcement, not just Border Patrol. I know we feel special, but I know that you take care of everybody. Uh, it's been astronomical.
thank you. Thank you. I love it. It's my mission. I love it. It's, it's a calling. And so it never feels like a job or it never feels like work. It feels like it's my passion.
Are you overwhelmed with work?
Yeah, we've had, some moments, right, where, when bad things happen back to back to back. Sometimes like after Uvalde, I looked at the calendar and figured out that I had basically worked for 34 days straight. So yeah, I mean, it's like there's moments, and then it calms down, and then there's chaos, and then it's like everything, it goes in waves, right? And so I do. My self care is really solid. I take really good care of myself. I work out every morning. I have a great team. I have great families, and I
Yeah.
just I'm very blessed. All right, and I have really good health. I was raised by two amazing parents that were just rock solid. And so for me, it's like when it hits the fan and it's time to go, that's my calling. And then you kind of start to wear down a little bit, and then you realize, oh yeah, I need a couple days off, so you take it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I post this video, I'm going to post links to your books and to your information, everything else like that. So, any last few words for the agents and the officers throughout DHS, CBP, Border Patrol that are going to listen to this podcast that you have for them before we close out?
Yeah, I think the what I always like to tell people at the end of a podcast is, if you are struggling, whatever you do, like, don't lose hope, because you are valued and you are loved, right? When our mental health is struggling, the brain tends to tell you that it's not worth it, or nobody will miss you when you're gone, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So I always like to say, the last thing I want to say is, please, if you're struggling, please know that you are valued, you are loved, and please reach out for help, because there's so much healing, there's so much good trauma recovery, there's so much good that can happen if you just like stop that downward spiral, catch yourself, and we can help you climb back out of it.
Amen. Amen to that. And I'll say also, add a little bit to that, is that, yes, family, our faith, exercise, diet, all those things that have helped me stay focused, stay sane. But reading your books and your information and that daily video you put out it's pure gold. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for doing that. Keep up that good work. We all love you. We all think you belong to us. So
Oh, I love you
we
guys right back. I
but
do.
that's just,
Absolutely.
because of the way you've carried yourself. You make us feel like every single one of us has been, is special to you. So that takes a special heart, a special talent, a special ability, and
Thank you.
we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you guys so much. And it's been an honor being on. I really, really can't thank you enough, Gil. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, and I appreciate you, and I hope we can maybe do this again in the future sometime.
Sounds great. I would love to come back.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.